I walked the broken battlefields until my boots were wet with blood. I am not ashamed to say I cried salt tears onto the earth as the scale of the devastation crushed my spirit. All around me were the pitiful moans of those who fell in that titanic confrontation. Hell's Reach was my baptism. I walked from it a changed man. The domains of the Imperium constantly repel forces which seek to destroy their splendor. The eras of constant warfare requiring vast armies to quell such interlopers. Yet among all such fiefdoms of the Emperor, some require more protection than others. Their vital productions, resources, or positioning crucial to stave off humanity's greatest foes. For today, we shall elucidate the onslaught of the Prophet of Gork and Mork, a battle which threatened to annihilate among the most crucial industrial worlds. The war within Hell's Reach. The Third War for Armageddon.
Orcs are never beaten in battle. We can always come back for another go.
Situated within the Armageddon sector of the Segmentum Solar, this industrial world of characteristic dour charm comprised a population of untold billions. The best guess of census data estimating the planet to be inhabited by as few as 100 or excess of 500 billion souls. A trading hub vital to the sustained war effort of the Imperium, this planet once torn from the clutches of the Orc Xenos would in its heyday be known by such aliens as Ulanor. Wrestled from the Greenskins before being transported to the Armageddon system in secret by the Mechanicus of Mars. Despite its relocation, the Orcs in their strange way divine the true nature of their former homeworld of origin and have since vowed to reclaim it. Already harried by the Second War for Armageddon during the year of 941.M41, the Orc warlord known as Ghazghul Mag Uruk Fraka had brought ruin under the surface of this manufacturing powerhouse, clashing with the defenders of the Steel Legion. Repelled with aid from reinforcements of the Space Marine chapters such as the Blood Angels, Salamanders, and Ultramarines, little would the warriors of the Imperium know that such a campaign was merely a prelude for the battle to come. Spurred on by visions from its piggish gods, Gork and Mork, never before had such a green-skinned menace plagued the Imperium, its 5 decades of planning probing human-made defenses as it accrued understanding of what it sought to destroy. Orchestrating its meticulous plans within the Golgotha sector, while the Imperium believed the warlord to no longer be a threat, in truth, the beast concocted new strategies and experiments on ways to crush its enemies. Using smaller planets as staging grounds to test its peculiar tactics, in the span of 14 years, reports of small Orc raids on numerous Imperial outposts, led by Fraka itself, reached Imperial authorities. During 962.M41, the military outpost of Buka II fell, a gigantic asteroid festering with Orcs passing through its defenses until unleashing its cargo of missiles onto the surface. During 972.M41, the agri-world of Chigon 17 was beset by hit-and-run strikes led by Fraka, their arsenal of armored vehicles useless with no targets to fire their payloads. The Navy battlecruiser Radiant Way lost with all hands during 986.M41 at the hands of Orc pirates. Ghazghul was once more cited as the culprit before slipping away back into the dark corners of the void. The world of Piscina 4 attacked by the warlord Nazdreg Ug Erdgrub, allied to the Prophet's cause during 997.M41. Interrogator Chaplain Boreas of the Dark Angels fended off waves of Xenos during the Battle of Kof Ridge alongside his kinsmen. Staving off the Orcs' teleporter units until reinforcements from the Deathwing could arrive, though the Orc energy relays would be destroyed by Master Belial of the Third Company, ensuring a Pyrrhic victory. Ghazghul had achieved his ultimate goal of testing his strange devices. For 50 years, Ghazghul Mag Uruk Fraka had toiled, yet now he stood ready. The Imperium standing idly until the hero of Hades' Hive, Sebastian Yarrick, rallied Armageddon once again for war. The Adeptus Terra providing many resources to rebuild the devastation wrought by the Second War for Armageddon. Naval command of the sector was transferred to the Armageddon system, retrofitting the St. John's dock to accommodate larger vessels. 3 monitoring stations established within the outer perimeter of the star system monitored for signs of invasion, their names of Mannheim, Dante, and Yarrick honoring the valor of the prior war's greatest leaders. Orbital defense guns were reinforced and rebuilt on the surface as countless sublight system defense ships littered the Armageddon system's void space, Every sundered hive city of the capital planet, slowly reconstructed, yet incomplete, after 50 years of effort. Reconstruction efforts exacerbated by the need to draft increased numbers of Planetary Defense Force soldiers from the otherwise capable labor force. The governors of each hive city of Armageddon convened to form a military council for the ordeals to come. Bolstered by aides of the Administratum, Mechanicus, and Ecclesiarchy, under the leadership of the veteran of the Bacchus Crusade, General Kurov, mortal soldiers of Armageddon carried out regular campaigns to purge the equatorial jungles of Armageddon Prime and Secundus, still teeming with survivors of the Second War. Eliminating orc infestations of the frozen world of Chosin, by outward appearances, Armageddon seemed impregnable. Yet the green tide awaiting was the largest ever seen in Imperial history, save for perhaps the hordes confronted during the Great Crusade. Orc raid suddenly bolstered with reports of incidents on the nearby worlds of Ruiz and Minerva. Despite the Navis Imperialis' sterling efforts, merchant fleet maneuvers in the surrounding sector of space were halved in number to ensure their protection. Within a single month, Imperial outposts were beset by probing strikes. The least defended Imperial colonies targeted first, as 24 worlds were claimed within mere hours by several Orc warbands. Direst of all were the portents of the Emperor's Tarot, each draw of the cards promising bloodshed perpetrated by the Beast Resurgent. The Imperial Navy Task Force, Trajan, lost in the tide of greenskins encroaching within the Desetna system, bearing credence to such readings. General Kurov sending astropathic messages to all Astra Militarum regiments and Space Marine chapters within reach, even in this early stage of the pre-campaign. All knew the war to come would require obscene military strength to defeat. The hours pass in a blur of statistical outlays, charts, hololithic projections, and graphs. The food supplies for the entire city, how long they will last once nothing can be brought from outside the hive, where the food is stored, the durability of these silos, buildings, and granaries, what weapons they can withstand, how they appear from the air, ration projections, sustainable food rationing planning, unsustainable food ration planning, with appended lists of estimated sacrificial casualties, where food riots are likely to break out once starvation is a reality. Water filtration centers, how many are required to be fully operational in order to supply the entire population? Which ones are likely to be destroyed first, once the city walls fall? Underground bunkers where water is currently stored, ancient well springs that might be tapped in times of great need, estimates of disease once the city is shelled, and civilian casualties are too heavy to be dealt with efficiently. Types of diseases, symptoms, severity, risk of contagion, compatibility with the Orc genus, lists of medical facilities. Endless screeds of how each one is supplied, as of the most recent stock reports, to the most minute detail. New stock checks are constantly performed, updated information cycles in all the while, even as we receive the previous batch. Militia numbers, conscripted and volunteer, training regimes and training schedules, weapon supplies, ammunition supplies for the civilian population currently under arms, projections for how long those supplies will last, hive defense forces straddling the line between militia and guard, who leads the individual sector forces, their weapons, their ammunition, their proximity to significant industrial targets, Imperial Guard numbers, throne what numbers, regiments, their officers, their live-fire training accuracy records, their citations, their shames, their moments of greatest glory and ignominy on a host of distant worlds, their insignia, their weapon and ammunition supplies, their access to armor units ranging from light scout vehicles such as Sentinels and Chimera through to super heavy Baneblades and Storm Swords. The guard figures alone take 2 days to file through, and this, they say, is merely the overview. The presence of the Adeptus Administratum to the campaign, allowing for exhaustive collation of data. Herein is an account of the entire battle preparations made by the Imperium of Man. 25 Steel Legion infantry regiments, including the 4th, 34th, 51st, 61st, 69th, 91st, 93rd, 101st, 121st, 141st, 273rd, 276th, and elite 703rd Stormtroopers standing ready. Additional forces comprised of 5 Ashwaste militias, 5 companies of the Command Guard, the Jungle Fighters, 5 Orc Hunter companies, and 125 Hive militia regiments would not forfeit their homeworld without a fight. Supported by their 8th, 34th, 121st, and 199th Steel Legion tank companies. Further mortal regiments such as 2 of the Asgardian Rangers, 15 of the Cadian Shock Troopers, 3 of the Catachan Jungle Fighters, 5 of the Death Corps of Krieg, 14 of the Elysian Drop Troops, 17 of the Jopal Indentured Squadrons, 3 of the Minervan Tank Legions, 6 of the Mordian Iron Guard, 6 of the Nocturne Strike Forces, 11 of the Akanon Phalanx Troopers, 10 of the Tyrant Dragoons, 9 of the Semtexian bombardiers, and 4 of the Juvan skirmishers would be further galvanized with 18 companies of Stormtrooper Elite. Further supported by 2 of the Krauk and 2 of the Monglor Ogren Auxilia, penal regiments such as the 13th Last Chancers, 6 regiments of the 14th Savlar Chemdogs, combined with an additional 2 Chemrider regiments, and the Arfista penal legions would complete the mortal ground forces of the Astra Militarum. Battlefleet Armageddon, bolstered by the 5,082nd Imperial Naval Wing, 14 Adeptus Astartes battle barges, 103 Astartes strike cruisers, 43 Starhawk bomber strike wings, 36 escort squadrons, 67 Fury Interceptor strike wings, and 27 cruiser squads comprise the fleet. The entire chapter strength of the Celebrants, Celestial Lions, Exorcists, Mortifactors, Omega Marines, and Relictors deployed to aid Armageddon's plight. 9 companies of the Black Dragons would arrive, with the Angels Porphia pledging 8. Chapters of the Angels of Fire, Iron Champions, and Silver Skulls committing 7 companies. The Angels of Vigilance, Salamanders, and Sons of Guilliman would deploy 6 companies, whilst the Flesh Terrors, Raptors, and Storm Giants commit 5. The Angels of Redemption, the only chapter to add 4 companies to the war zone, while the White Scars pledge 3 brotherhoods to the hunt. The Marines Malevolent and Stormlords commit 2 of their own. The smallest of all chapter presences, those of the Blood Angels, Immortal Hearts, Red Scorpions, and Widowmakers, adding only a single company to the endeavor, the elite Deathwatch Xenos Hunters would also offer 2 kill teams to the undertaking. High Marshal Helbrecht of the Black Templars, arriving with 3 crusades comprised of over 900 Astartes. Such a force typically would be more befitting the compliance of entire star systems, yet such was Armageddon's need, they would comprise only a fraction of the war effort. Yet largest of all Astartes' forces on Armageddon would be that of the Space Wolves, their quirk of training great companies allowing 5 such assortments, consisting of as many as 5,000 Space Marines to the fray, led by their great wolf, Logan Grimnar. The Tech Priests of Mars, looming large as their Arch Mechanicus hung in low orbit, 4 Ordinati of the Centurio Ordinatus, supported by 14 Skitarii regiments, would form the spear tip of the Titan Legios, such as Crucius, Ignatum, Invigilata, Magna, Metallica, Tempesto, and Victorum. Battle Sisters of the Argent Shroud, alongside the 3 of the Order of our Martyred Lady. Such would be galvanized by 12 punitive battalions, reinforcing their might. Additional mortal auxilia, such as 20 Adeptus Arbites precincts, 34 members of the Officio Sabbatorum, 15 disruption squads of the Templar Psychologists, 2 Engineer Corps, and 1 Pioneer Corps of the Departamento Munitorum end the vast assortment of forces comprising the Imperial defense. Yet every single one would be needed to confront the looming greenskin threat, an estimated 12 to 16 Space Hulks leading the charge of a fleet of several thousand Orc battleships. Orc numbers difficult to keep track of due to their ramshackle nature, while as many as 400 kill cruisers would in time descend upon the Armageddon system, as many as 100 Orc rocks filled to the brim with ordnance likewise would be hurled into the conflict. Over 300 mobs destined to deploy upon Armageddon Prime, supported by 38 Gargants and 16 battle fortresses. Ghazghul Mag Uruk Thraka would lead the assault of Armageddon Secundus, beside over 500 mobs, 50 Gargants, and 32 battle fortresses. The fire waste beset by over 120 mobs, alongside 18 Gargants. The Deadlands would endure the ravages of over 320 mobs and 242 battle fortresses, as the Greenskins fortified such lands to refuel and rearm over 3,000 fighter bombers. The battle lines had been drawn, yet nothing would prepare either side for the onslaught to come. For Armageddon soil had already been soaked in blood, and once again it would drink deep of the vitae of billions.
It is with great regret that I must confirm that the Greenskin menace has again returned to Armageddon. 3 of our monitoring stations already lie destroyed, and it is now impossible to ascertain their exact location. Though I can say with certainty that they will be here soon, and in some numbers.
During the Feast of the Emperor's Ascension, 57 years following the bloody invasion of Ghazghul, the Greenskin Horde once more cast its shadow upon Armageddon during 998.M41. Transmissions from Monitor Station Dante silenced as hundreds of Voidcraft tore through its domains. As many as 4 Space Hulks and 50 cruisers were reported to be accompanied by 300 escorts. As 7 cruiser squadrons mobilized to confront the threat, within 5 days of such reports, battle had been joined, ambushing the Greenskins in proximity to the world of Pellucida. Sundering 60 Orc Voidcraft with only a single loss of the Imperial fleet, Despite Admiral Parov's naval prowess, they would be suffocated by swarms of kill cruisers and fighter bombers. The Imperial fleet outnumbered 6-1. It would not take long for Peral's forces to withdraw to Armageddon. Their losses of monitoring stations Yarrick and Mannheim, warning of 3 more fleets entering from the edge of the system. Over 2,000 Ork starships accompanied by 12 Space Hulks assailing the Armageddon system. Admiral Parov, with only a single battleship and 5 cruiser squadrons, conducted hit-and-run maneuvers until reinforcements could arrive, bombarding St. John's Dock to allow the bulk of their forces to pass through to Armageddon. Within a matter of weeks, the ground invasion of the Orks had begun. As Space Marines clad in colors of over 20 chapters took position alongside Titans, tank divisions, and humble guardsmen, a venerated hero of the world, known by the populace as the Old Man, stepped off of the last inbound transport. Inspired by the presence of the hero of Hades Hive, the Commissar of Legend met with the military council of Armageddon, advising them of the recent maneuvers of Ghazghkull made within the Golgotha sector and beyond. Warning them to not underestimate the Greenskin, nor his armies, his unconventional tactics would make his previous campaign upon Armageddon soil pale in comparison. General Kurov entrusting Yarrick with the leadership of the council henceforth. The defenders of the industrial world scrambled to make final preparations for 6 weeks, until the proverbial hammer blow finally landed. For 2 days, the orbital battle waged, as the defenses of Armageddon unleashed their fury. The skies ablaze with smoke and ordnance, the daybreak of the 3rd day obscured as greenskins blotted out the sun in their multitudes. Ork landing craft and sundered void craft impacting upon the surface as volleys of gunfire raged from each hive city. Commissar Yarrick's Baelai shone ablaze with fury as a gigantic asteroid crushed Hades Hive with a single devastating blow. Hive Volcanus, Acheron, and Deathmire, the first to clash with the Xenos invaders, the feral Orks of the Second War who had survived within the Pelidus Mountains and Equatorial Jungle, joined their kin in the slaughter, now emboldened with their arrival. Teleporting larger war machines into the fray from their space hulks in orbit using their strange technologies, Yarrick ordered all available aircraft to inflict as many casualties as possible, before further descending reinforcements could add to their numbers. Imperial Thunderbolts began dogfighting the fighter bombers, the skies overhead ablaze with immolating aircraft, picking off those who attempted to return back to their space hulks in orbit. Within 5 days, Hive Acheron fell, its power grid sabotaged by insurgents using secret access tunnels originally used by former planetary governor Hermann von Straub to flee from the devastation of the prior war. Returning to his fiefdom, declaring himself to be the divine ruler of Armageddon, the maddened von Straub alongside his Ork allies purged the dissenters of his reign. Hive Volcanus, likewise seized by the Orks during the same day of subterfuge, the 17 Hive militia regiments garrisoned within fell to captured Imperial barrage bombs and macro cannons. The Scions of the Mechanicus, faring far better in their defense of Hive Deathmire, Legios Tempestor and Victorum sundered the Blackfire tribe of the Orks after 3 days of grueling battle upon the plain of Anfrand. Untold landers spilling forth new waves of Orks to the front lines, Armageddon's defenders fought with matchless zeal as they pushed back the Greenskin tide, Ghazghkull's strategies proving extremely effective, much to the chagrin of Yarrick. Securing Armageddon's airspace, the Orks bombarded the defenders whenever they rallied to form battle lines, their infantry surrounding smaller defensive positions and withdrawing when outnumbered themselves. Chaotic, bloody, and completely out of line to typical Ork doctrines. If such an attribution is even accurate, Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka had learned from his prior defeats well, and now held Armageddon at its mercy. Yet one force alone proved capable of combating the Orks effectively: the Space Marines.
Never before has the Ork menace been greater. Ghazghkull has achieved what we thought impossible. He has united hundreds of warbands, but with a single goal: the total and utter destruction of humanity in the Armageddon sector. A raid against this barbaric horde is the greatest force of arms the Imperium has mustered since the time of Lord Solar Macarius. The fate of hundreds of worlds will be decided on the blood-soaked ash dunes of Armageddon, and we cannot afford to fail.
Total war had erupted upon Armageddon. The barrage of rocks, pushed by gravitic force fields and retro boosters, outfitted with excessive amounts of firepower to quell any resistance met following impact. Though some would erupt from within due to the unreliable nature of Ork technology, each that survived formed defensive outposts for the Orks to resupply and reorganize, their teleport arrays within allowing further reinforcements to be beamed directly to the surface. Gargants and heavy artillery transported from their space hulks to aid in their advance, Each rock which loomed upon the horizon was a threat too dangerous to ignore. Sebastian Yarrick personally leading assaults on such outposts with support from the Legio Metallica and Ignatum. Whilst the Steel Legion pushed the attack, the Space Marines likewise unleashed vengeance in the name of the Emperor. The Salamanders, most noted for their success, destroying many rock fortifications across the Hemlock River. One mystery would nonetheless remain as to why the Orcs had made so many landings within the barren fire wastes and dead lands. Realizing the Orcs to be building enormous submersibles, weeks following their arrival from the polluted rivers, new threats would arise to harry Hive Tempestora and Hell's Reach. Blood Angels captain Erasmus Tycho leading the defense of Hive Tempestora. This veteran of the Second War had inherited his rank with the death of his former captain 50 years prior, and endured countless trials during his half-century of leadership. Having already fallen victim to the Black Rage during the fighting, Tycho unshackled the wrath of Sanguinius upon his foes, visions of his Primarch's demise transforming his impressive martial skill into a frenzy of superhuman fury against friend and foe alike. Capitalizing on the mayhem wrought by Tycho, the Orcs conquered Hive Tempestora within days. 3 hives now captured by the Greenskins within 2 weeks of their first landings, with Gargants now prowling the lands in search of targets. The 10-day clash of Legio Crucius against such foes within the factory complex of Diabolus, 6 of their number would fall, claiming 8 Gargants in turn, both sides of the battle withdrawing to tend to their damaged war machines, which would take months to repair as the great foundries of Diabolus fell silent. The Orcs capturing the Hive, establishing defenses to their pillaged fiefdom. Tycho would return clad in the black and red of the Death Company, making his final stand within the walls of Tempestora. Fighting with skill alike to the Primarch Sanguinius himself, despite sustaining wounds which even an Astartes would not survive, Tycho refused to fall until his bloody work was done. His golden mask torn from his face, dangling by a strand of flesh. The world which claimed his master was now his own graveyard. Erasmus's charge into the Orc hordes, allowing a counterattack led by his company and the Astra Militarum to reclaim a foothold within. Hive Infernus, encircled by speed cults, preventing resupply or reinforcement. The Savlar Chemdogs lost an entire regiment to their vehicles, forcing the Imperials to abandon relief efforts. An ocean of greenskins spilled from the Pelidus Mountains, covering the entirety of the Ash Wastes, their banners stitched with the personal heraldry of the Prophet of Gork and Mork, promising doom. Violence erupting within the Hives, forcing the arbitrators to put down disobedient citizens. Hive Infernus would receive a single message from the Prophet of Gork and Mork, spoken by the mutilated colonel, Gortar of the Savlar Chemdogs: surrender or die. The defenders of Dante's Canyon, within Armageddon's Deadlands, protecting the water stores of St. Capelline and the Lemaire Channel, the White Scars Tulwar Brotherhood, led by Suboden Khan, confronted the Evil Sun's White Lightnings. Perilous shifts in the terrain, forcing the Orcs to withdraw after the first days of fighting, with the following day's assault of 3 bands of speed cult racers and storm boys. All were punished by the White Scars, using explosive charges placed beneath the ice of the frozen sea during nightfall. Suboden Khan beheading the Evil Sun's war boss in a duel before casting its body from the cliffside of the facility. Yet perhaps the greatest valor of the campaign would be won by the sons of Rogul Dawn, the paladins of the Solemnus Crusade joining the fray, following the havoc wrought by the war boss, Morkrul Grimskar. Striding forth with vengeance in their hearts for the war boss's defilement of their chapter keep, Emperor's champion Angzar of the Solemnus Crusade, though wounding the Xenos leader, had been captured as a means for the Orc to use his panoply as parts for his own cyborg Orcmetics. Such heretical actions unforgivable, especially when inflicted upon such a pious chapter. The Black Templar strike force led by Dreadnought Geralt tracked Grimskar to Armageddon to bring the Xenos to justice. The venerated Crimson Fist Dreadnought, Rhodomanus, released from his entombment within ice from his prior battle of the Second War, standing supporting Geralt's assault of Grimskar's camp. The Crusaders of Black and Crimson destroyed the war boss's stompers and teleporter arrays, raining down fury as their torpedo bombardment cleansed what remained of the camp. Grimskar escaping for a time, finding sanctuary within Armageddon's equatorial jungle. The Relictus chapter, led by Oberon Uris, confronted the fleeing Greenskin, yet could not repay its cowardice with death. Running from its betters once more, the veterans of Solemnus with aid from the Relictors tracked the war boss to an ancient warp gate, once used during the First War for Armageddon. A band of time-displaced Khornate Berserkers, unleashed from its activation. Pushing back the Chaos Warband of the Forsworn and succeeding in closing the warp gate, Chaplain Wolfram forbade the Relictors from claiming demonic weapons from the aftermath, causing them to set upon one another, with no survivors remaining to speak of the victor. Yet the zeal of the Black Templars was felt far and wide across this accursed world, and for their newly appointed Reclusiarch, the mightiest spiritual leader of their chapter, Armageddon would leave an indelible mark on his mind forevermore. One of the giants, wearing a helm shaped into a grinning skull mask of shining silver and steel, stepped forward to meet the colonel. With him came 5 other knights, each carrying swords and massive bolters, but for one who bore a towering standard. Upon the banner, which waved lazily in the dull breeze, a scene of red and black depicted the Skullhelm Knight, bathed in the golden purity of a flaming aquila overhead. "I am Grimaldus," the first knight said, his gem-like eye lenses staring down at the portly colonel. "Reclusiarch of the Hellsreach Crusade." The colonel drew breath to make his own greeting, when the 100 knights in formation cried out a chant in skin-crawling unity.
"Imperator Volts!"
Saren glanced at the ranks of knights, formed up in 5 ranks of 20 warriors. None of them seemed to have moved, despite their cry in High Gothic. "The Emperor wills it." High Marshal Helbrecht, honored chapter master of the Black Templars, had commanded the naval battle in orbit for days. His reputation as perhaps the greatest naval commander of the Astartes, rewarded with supreme leadership of the Astartes fleet. Having brought his own crusade fleet and 2 others beside to defend the industrial world, even with the might of Battlefleet Armageddon and untold millions of naval crew facing the foe in the void, not even this once-in-a-millennia assemblage would stave off the Greenskins from making planetfall. Yet upon the ash wastelands below, a new crusade would be formed to stem the Greenskin tide, the Hellsreach Crusade, a fighting force capable of defending the crucial hive of the same name as Marshals Ricard and Amalric deployed to other bastions. As Helbrecht boarded space hulks above, carving his glory through hordes of greenskin filth, for a time, Reclusiarch Merrick Grimaldus stood idly upon Armageddon's soil, containing his fury at such an ignoble posting, whilst his kin above reveled in the slaughter. The Black Templar Sword Brethren, aiding their legion invading the Space Hulk, the Malevolent Dread. This boarding action on a scale never before seen incurred wounds aplenty, yet the Templars stubbornly refused to relent. Yet as this magnificent battle waged, Grimaldus waited for the Orcs to descend upon Hellsreach, his position inherited from his predecessor, Mordred, still weighing heavily upon him, as uncertainty of his worthiness to such a position gnawed at his psyche. Leading 100 of his kinsmen to war, as the Orcs began to fall from the heavens and amass outside Hellsreach's walls, its proximity to the roadway, known as Hell's Highway, enabling swift movement of titans and armored columns to crucial war zones, a resource which could not be surrendered. Garrisoned by the 121st Steel Legion, commanded by Colonel Saren of the 101st, though the mortal defenders would initially be treated with contempt by the Templars, Grimaldus would learn to step out of his mentor's shadow and begin to forge his own path to righteousness. Grimaldus's decisions, tainted by the melancholy which gripped his soul, believing himself to die fruitlessly upon this accursed world. Regardless, the Reclusiarch's indefatigable piety won him many allies and from seemingly impossible circumstance. Supported by the princeps of Legio Invigilata, Zahar Mencion, galvanized by a gesture of solidarity, as the sky caught fire, the night hereafter, a strike cruiser designated as the purest of intent crash-landed on the surface, resurfacing old memories. Once belonging to the extinct chapter known as the Shadow Wolves, Grimaldus a decade prior had borne witness to their destruction at the hands of the Tyranids upon their homeworld of Varadon. The image of the last Shadow Wolf holding aloft his chapter's banner in defiance as the great Devourer tore him limb from limb. This memory, which Grimaldus regarded as beautiful, would be repaid by cleansing the fallen ship of its Xenos inhabitants. Purging the Orcs infesting the Shadow of Intent as a symbolic victory for the defenders of Hive Hellsreach. As the Templars returned to its walls, Colonel Saren warned of Orc rock bombardments raining down upon the surface. Preparing for battle, as Saren's 101st defended the command spire of the Hive, upon the northern walls, Grimaldus rallied the 273rd Desert Vultures of the Steel Legion, as gun emplacements prevented dropships from breaching the Hive. Facing the blood-crazed and over-eager Greenskins who attempted to charge the Hive's walls, whilst Commander Barasev's Aeronautica Imperialis squadrons bombarded their lines, Grimaldus inspired the mortal soldiers with a rousing speech. Casting back the Greenskins, as the first engagement of Hive Hellsreach began in earnest. As the Orcs regrouped, Grimaldus pursued an investigation pertaining to rumors which he had gleaned from the Desert Vulture defenders. Demanding the presence of the Black Templars Master of the Forge, Jerizian, and Adjutant Quintus Sirio Tyro to accompany him to a Mechanicus bunker situated within the Ash Wastes, Grimaldus would leave the Emperor's champion, Bayard, in command of his forces. Discovering the tomb of the Ordinatus weapon platform, Oberon, beneath the planet's surface, should such a relic of the First War for Armageddon be reactivated, the otherwise hopeless defense of Hive Hellsreach may be bolstered. Such meddling of the Mechanicus' affairs, angering Princeps Zaha, Reclusiarch Grimaldus refuted the objections of the Machine God subjects as he met with them aboard the Titan, Storm Herald. Placing his own life at risk upon Storm Herald's bridge, ordering his men to kill all aboard with his gunships should the Princeps prevent his departure. Though cowed, Princeps Zaha would not abandon her vow of allegiance to the plight of Hellsreach. The war of attrition worsening as Gargants began to harry Steel Legion positions. Though Legio Invigilata fought with unmatched terrifying fury, Storm Herald itself would lie dormant as the fighting waged to secure the Orc airfields raged. The machine spirit inside, overwhelming Zaha's mind after years of subjugation to her will. The Black Templars intervened to salvage the costly maneuver made by Commander Baraseth, with Grimaldus awakening the Princeps from her mental imprisonment through inspiring words of camaraderie. Yet as the Orcs secured parts of Hell's Highway, their mobilization efforts swelled, the city falling in short order with so many greenskins suffocating defensive positions with sheer force of numbers. 25 Templars lay dead as battle escalated, with the gene seed of half beyond salvation. Hundreds of Orc submersibles striking from the poison sea, unleashing the mad genius of the being known as Orchimedes. Its enormous gargants now allowed unfettered movement, with Hell's Highway secured. A month's fighting, culminating in the final push to overwhelm Hellsreach. News of Hive Tempestus' fall, an omen of doom for the defenders of the twice as large, yet beleaguered city. Dockmen militia mobilizing to evacuate the enormous civilian population as best they could. As the Templars fought to preserve what humanity remained to live on, Jerizian, after weeks of toil, managed to breach the firewall, preventing activation of the Ordinatus Armageddon. Battling an ancient Mechanicus Guardian who sought to deny the Master of the Forge his prize. With the defeat of the Tech Guardian, Jerizian made all haste to pilot the Oberon to aid in the defense of Hellsreach. Typically requiring an entire detachment of Skitarii to pilot even the most basic systems of its construction, Jerizian's many mechanical appendages made do with what they could articulate, as he made all haste for the Hive. Yet as the Oberon rumbled into life, reinforcements would aid Armageddon in its hour of direst need. The returned veterans of the last war on its soil, the Salamanders. One ship, the Serpentine. Sea green and charcoal black, it dived like a dragon of myth through the enemy fleet, while the rest of the Imperial warships hammered into the Orcish invaders, breaking against the ring of alien cruisers surrounding the planet. One ship broke through, running a gauntlet of enemy fire, its shields crackling into lifelessness and its hull aflame. The Serpentine hadn't come to fight. As the Astartes vessel tore through the upper atmosphere, drop pods and thunderhawks rained from its ironclad belly, streaming down to the world below. Its duty complete, the Serpentine powered its way back into the fight. Its captain gritted his teeth against a screed of damage reports, signaling the death of his beloved ship. But there was no shame in dying for such a vital duty done. He had acted under the orders of the highest authority, a warrior on the surface below whose deeds were already inscribed in 100 annals of Imperial glory. That warrior had demanded this risk be taken, and that reinforcements be held down to Armageddon, no matter the odds facing them. His name was Tushan, Lord of the Fireborn, and the Serpentine did his will. The Serpentine's end never came. A black shape eclipsed the fat-hulled Orcish destroyers, cutting the Astartes vessel to pieces. Another ship, a far greater ship, pounded the alien attackers into wreckage with overwhelming broadside fire, buying the Serpentine the precious moments it needed to escape the gauntlet it had run a second time. As they broke clear, the Serpentine's captain breathed out a prayer and signaled across the bridge to the Master of Communications.
"Send word to the Eternal Crusader,"
he said.
"Give them the sincerest thanks of our chapter."
The response from the Eternal Crusader came back almost immediately. The grim voice of High Marshal Helbrecht echoed across the Serpentine's bridge.
"It is the Black Templars that thank you, Salamander."
The Fireborn's champions already regaled as champions for their efforts in defeating Garsgul's army during the Second War for Armageddon. The amassed strength of the overwhelming majority of their strength would once more be unleashed by their chapter master, Tushan. Launching several counterattacks to blunt the most egregious Orc advances across swathes of the planet, Vulcan's wrath would be felt with blade, flamer, and bolter fire, as his scions breathed deep the smoke and fire which they had wrought. Sundering the Orc rocks which littered the Hemlock River, 9 would be destroyed by their cleansing flame as the populace cheered on their noble savior's advance. Yet Grimaldus of the Black Templars would not see such valor through his eyes. The strike cruiser Serpentine, forcing its way through the Orc blockade in orbit, drop pods descended upon Hellsreach, disgorging 70 Astartes, led by Sergeant Vareth. Fighting beside the Black Templars, with the intent of rescuing civilians above decapitating the Orc leadership, friction quickly arose between the chapters as Merrick and his men bemoaned the futility of the Salamander's actions. The prudence of the Black Templars to slay enemies to prevent future casualties, exacerbated by the Salamander's need to selflessly hurl themselves into costly engagements. Demanding Vareth and his men to leave his city as Hellsreach fell to ruin, as the Salamanders answered hails from their chaptermaster to rejoin their kin upon the Hemlock, the Black Templars abided the orders of Commissar Yarrick to converge on holdouts within the doomed city. Converging upon the Temple of the Emperor Ascendant, as the population which remained sought shelter from the deepening greenskin tide, the Black Templars dug their own graves upon such holy soil and prepared for the inevitable last stand of the Hellsreach Crusade. Receiving reports of Storm Herald's demise at the claws of the enormous Orc Gargant, Godbreaker, Legio Invigilata retreated from the city, abandoning the Steel Legion and Black Templar survivors desperately staving off invaders of the temple. Fighting beside the custodians of the temple, the Order of the Argent Shroud, led by Prioress Sindel, 35 Black Templars remained standing, though soon their deeds made in the name of the Emperor would end. Fighting tooth and nail to preserve the bastion of the ecclesiarchal district of Hive Hellsreach, Emperor's champion Bayard fell in battle, allowing Priamus of Squad Grimaldus to assume his mantle for the last bitter hours of fighting. The Godbreaker, arriving within proximity of the Temple of the Emperor Ascendant, ready to unleash devastation upon the survivors. As if sent by the Omnissiah itself, Jerizian, aboard the Ordinatus Armageddon, alongside Princeps Amasat, let loose its Nova Cannon, ending the Mega Gargant's reign. Ordering the Master of the Forge to regroup with the Legio Invigilata defending the Hemlock River to deny the Ordinatus falling into enemy hands, Grimaldus and his last remaining warriors accepted their fate to die, fighting in the name of the Master of Mankind. All but Grimaldus and a handful of guardsmen surviving the destruction of the Temple of the Emperor Ascendant. After 2 months of fighting, the countless battles waged upon Armageddon's surface began to dwindle, as the planet itself made its wrath known. They call it the Season of Fire. The ash wastes are choking with dust from roaring volcanoes. Planet-wide, the pictures show the same images over and over. Our vessels in orbit watch Armageddon breathe fire and send the images back to the surface, so that those there might witness the world's anger in its entirety. Fighting across most of the world is ceasing, not because of victory or defeat, but because there can be no arguing with Armageddon itself. The ash deserts are already turning dark. In a handful of days, no man or Xenos beast will be able to breathe in the wastelands. Their lungs would fill with ashes and embers. Their war machines would grind to a halt, fouled beyond use. So, the war ceases for now. It does not end. There is no tale of triumph and victory to tell. The beasts stagger and crawl back to cities they have managed to hold, there to hide away from the Season of Fire. Imperial forces consolidate the territories to which they still lay claim, and drive the invaders out from those where the Orcs have managed to grasp no more than a weak hold. Hellsreach is one of these places, that necropolis in which 100 of my brothers lie dead, alongside hundreds of thousands of loyal souls. That tomb city, so much of which is flattened by the devastation of 2 months road-by-road warfare, with no industrial output left at all. Imperial tacticians are hailing it as a victory. I will never again understand the humanity I left behind when I ascended to the ranks of the Templars. The perceptions of humans remain alien to me, the moment I swore my first oaths to Dawn. But I will let the people of this blighted world claim their triumph. I will let the survivors of Hellsreach cheer and celebrate a drawn-out defeat that masquerades as victory. And, as they have requested, I will return to the surface once more. I have something of theirs in my possession. Despite the progress made by the Orcs in overrunning the planet of Armageddon, the Greenskins did not in the end succeed in reclaiming the homeworld of their origin, its tumultuous Season of Fire ending the fighting on both sides of the conflict. Smothered in noxious ashes, spewed from the planet's abundant volcanoes, humans and Orcs alike sheltered within whatever bastions they had claimed. Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka's Space Hulk, the perversion of pain, departing with the end of hostilities. The abrupt withdrawal of the Prophet of Gork and Mork and the bulk of his forces, sending the Greenskins on the surface into disarray, as High Marshal Helbrecht ordered his men to pursue. Commissar Sebastian Yarrick successfully petitioned to join his forces. Yet the Third War for Armageddon was not over, with so many Xenos still infesting its hives, the Imperium reinforcing their numbers with fresh troops from off-world, claiming a Pyrrhic victory in the name of the Emperor. what remained of the Greenskins, continuing their aggression, deeming the battle henceforth to be known as the Big Scrap, also known as Ragnarok by some of the defenders of the planet. Though billions had already perished, a new threat in time would further compound such numbers. The 13th Penal Legion of Colonel Schaefer executing the traitor's former planetary governor, Hermann von Straub. Though the fall of such an infamous tyrant could have marked a tidy end to the campaign, conflict still rages upon Armageddon to this day. 2 companies of the Salamanders remaining upon Armageddon to ensure the protection of Imperial-held hive cities. The Tech Marines of Vulcan rebuilt what they could of their infrastructure, saving thousands with their toil. The sanguinary guard of the Blood Angels, carrying the granite sarcophagus of Captain Erasmus Tycho upon their shoulders during his burial upon Baal. Chaplain Namates interred his body with honors as a hero of Hive Tempestora and a true scion of their creed. Reclusiarch Merrick Grimaldus had survived the ordeal of the Hell's Reach Crusade and been remade in battle. His respect for mortal soldiers galvanized, now inspired by their bravery in battle, as he carries the relics of the Temple of the Emperor Ascendant into future wars. Guardsmen in the millions had perished, with no records pertaining to the civilian cost. The deployment of over 50,000 Space Marines to the fray, and dozens of God Machines of war, unable to prevent catastrophe. Yet as the wounds upon Armageddon began to heal, a new threat would loom on the horizon. The destruction of Cadia a year henceforth, plunging the galaxy into darkness with the birth of the Great Rift and loss of the Astronomicon's light. For whilst orcs and humans fought to retain what little remained to them, a new enemy would rise from the blood-soaked Earth, an old nemesis whose wrath had not been sated from the war which the planet's descendants had been ignorant of its impact. These are your relics, the last treasures of the first men and women ever to set foot upon your world. They are the most precious treasures of your ancestors, and they are yours by right of legacy and blood. I return them to you from the edge of destruction, and I thank you not only for the honor of standing by the people of this city, but for the lessons I have learned. My brothers in orbit have asked me why I dragged these relics from beneath the fallen temple, but you have no need to ask, for you each already know the answer. They are yours, and no alien beast will deny the people of this world the inheritance they deserve. I dragged these relics back into the sunlight for you, to honor you, and to thank you all, and in humility now, I return them to you. This time, when the cheers come, they are shaped by the orator. He uses the title I swore to High Marshal Helbrecht, standing before Mordred's statue, that I would not refuse when it was formally awarded to me.
I am told,
the High Marshal had said afterwards,
that Yarrick and Korov have spoken with the Ecclesiarchy. You are being given the relics to carry Hellsreach's memory and honor with you in the Eternal Crusade.
When I return to the surface, I will offer the icons back to the people.
Mordred would not have done so,
Helbrecht said, masking any emotion, any judgment from me. I am not Mordred, I told my liege, and the people deserve the choice. It is for them that we wage that war, for them and their world, not purely for the holy reaping of inhuman life. This has been a tale of the Great Imperium of Man, read by the Remembrancer. The Third War for Armageddon is among the costliest battles ever waged by humanity. The death of billions and valor of untold, unremembered souls made in efforts to achieve a tenuous end to battle. Each of us are the inheritors of luxuries won through blood. Each liberty and right we benefit from, bought with the sacrifices of those who have gone before. Do not take for granted what bedrocks of prosperity you have, for it is easy to become blind to the value of mundane comforts. For each refinement of our standards of living and rights to human decency, if not honored, will slip through our grasp, alike to grains of red-stained sand.